Good evening, everyone. Seth here at the Visual Arts Academy in studio, along with our humble wizard himself, Chad Nuss. Chad, how you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Another couple hours we get to talk, create, and just add the conversation into creativity. I'm excited for this. It's going to be a great evening. We're so grateful for all of you guys joining us. If it is your first time joining us, the whole point here is to talk all things art while we create. So hopefully you get a sketch pad, you got an easel, you've got something to work with, something creative, scissors, paper. Doesn't matter how you're working, but getting you creative and having conversations about art and creativity. Chad, we've talked a lot about art history. We've talked about influence, processes. I mean, really, is there anything arts-wise that we don't really discuss?
I don't think so. I sometimes I get to the point where I'm trying to figure out something new to talk about because we've talked about so many different things.
It's amazing. And can you believe that we are now on episode 26 of our V.A.A.S live sessions? It's pretty spectacular.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing. I look forward to many, many more for sure.
Here in a few minutes, hopefully we'll have our co-founder, Thomas Tupper, join us as well. He's going to be working on some of his art, and he's going to be joining us here shortly. But Chad, you've kind of changed the stage a little bit today. You've got something different. I think you've only done this one other time before, maybe around episode 9 or 10. But what are you going to be working on today?
Yeah, so I switched it up because I'm doing the live from home now, and I'll probably be doing that for a little while. But yeah, so I've got a couple projects at home, but I thought this is the perfect time to work on my comic book. I've not worked on my comic book in probably a couple months now, just because I've been working on some other projects. So this is a page from volume 3 of The Silence. And this is, I think, page 4, I believe. And so, yeah, in the early stages of the book. And I'm in the process of doing the pencils. I've already done all the layouts for the entire book. And now this is a process of going page by page, putting in the pencils. And then I follow that up by inking all the pencils and then putting in all the dialogue and layouts and the final run after that. So that's what I'm working on tonight.
That's awesome. And I am, as most of you can see, continuing the oil painting of my oldest daughter, Everly. And I'm working on a Flemish grisaille process where everything is being painted in grayscale, and then I'll be doing glazes over top. If you've watched some of our previous episodes, you'll notice I did a portrait of my other daughter, and I finished that piece, so I'm working on this one now. But Chad, one of the things that I think is so interesting is you've done everything from large-scale graphite, large-scale charcoal, figurative work. You've done all that stuff on our live streams, but really your passion is storytelling, right? Whether it's a single image or whether it's multiple pages, you love telling a really, really good story. And on this page, what's happening at this point in the story? Where are we at? I don't want you to give the whole book away because you're going to have to pick a copy up for yourself. But just what's happening on this page? Because I see a whole bunch of really cool stuff happening there. Tell us a little bit about what you're trying to capture, or what point in the story we are with this.
Yeah, so as kind of the big picture of the story, it's a universe in which science has been outlawed. And so as a result, everyone's just kind of has competing worldviews, and everyone's trying to basically rule or take over or have power according to their worldview. So on this planet, it's a dystopian planet. I started with that just because that's one of my favorite types of literature is dystopian literature. And so this particular scene is, you can see there's a man laying on a kind of like a hospital bed and some android robots standing around him. I can lift this up so you can see a little bit closer. And yeah, so he's got some kind of android robots guiding him through this passageway, and up to the top you see a bunch of figures there. I still have to work on that and clean that part up. But those are some other patients. And yeah, he's being wheeled in through this doorway corridor. And then on the next page, I won't give it away, but you find out what happens once he gets in there. And I hope to tonight finish up most of the pencils on this page. And then hopefully I've got a blank page here, start on the next page. So that's kind of where we're at right now in the story.
Well, that's exhilarating to me because we get to see you kind of finish up pencils and then start pencils, right? So, I mean, because if I'm looking at this and I'm a new, and I'm drawing or I'm starting my own comic, I'm sitting there going, boy, that's a really tight page, right? I mean, those are some pretty tight pencils. So I get to see you kind of finish up that page, but then start a whole new one. I'm curious to see how light you start, if you start light and loose, kind of flesh it out, figure it out. But guys, if this is your first time joining us, we thank you so much for watching along Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, X, Instagram. We're so glad that you're joining us live. We are the Visual Arts Academy and Studio based out of Louisville, Kentucky. But the great thing is these live sessions allow us to create with you no matter where you are. So we're so grateful for you jumping in. Jimena, Mrs. Fashions, M.W. Voigt. I'm not going to get all these names right, but I could keep going. Thank you guys for jumping in and joining us. We're so glad that you guys are joining us live here. Ask questions. Let us know what you're working on. The whole point of this is to have conversations about creativity, art history, processes. So let us know you're here. Let us know what your favorite part is. And most importantly, ask some questions or let us know what you're working on so we can talk about that. We're really grateful you guys are here. We're going to keep working on this. And Chad, I will tell you, I got really excited today because I brought you a book upstairs of one of my favorite comic artists. And if you guys don't know, we have this running kind of joke here because one of my favorite comic artists growing up was a beautiful comic artist named David Mack, who has now become very, very famous for creating the character Echo on Daredevil. And of course, he's just a brilliant, brilliant comic artist. And I would say just multimedia artist across the board. And I took this book upstairs and I go, hey, Chad, I want you to see this book. And why don't you tell him, oh, humble wizard, why don't you tell him what your response was when I said, take a look at this beautiful book of David Mack's work?
Oh, well, of course, I'd remind you that, yes, you have this book of all this art, but I met him. Like, we're best friends. So, you know, you get to look at his work, but I actually got to talk to him and hang out with him for a day. So, whatever, your book's not that impressive. So,
It was impressive to me. No, I'm so grateful. It's so wonderful. Guys, it's amazing when you get to meet other artists, and that's part of why we built this community. We have classes and courses out of our art studio. We have 7,200 square feet, but this virtual community is so important. It's unbelievably powerful when you can create together, which is part of why I was making that joke, because when you get to meet other artists and you get to be around them, it's exhilarating and inspiring, and that's what this whole point of VAAS Live is. So we hope that you get inspired. We hope that you're creating, and I'm going to dive in, Chad. I've pre-mixed some of my paints. I am working in oils, and I have done a 50-50 mix of Galkid Light and linseed oil. And actually, I don't think I've talked about this on the live stream too much, but basically what this does is this speeds up the drying time a little bit for my oils, and it changes the consistency just a little bit. So I'm adding in a little bit of Galkid Light and linseed oil. This is a 50-50 mix, and so that when I'm working on my oils, it helps me move, it gets me layers, but it's also not going to take as long to dry as traditional just straight linseed oil in there. So I'm working on that, and I'm going to keep going. I'm now working on the face of my daughter. I've been bouncing around the canvas a little bit. I've got some of the pillow going, the blanket. I've got her shirt. I do have some details on the shirt I want to add, Chad, but I'm going to kind of dive in on her face here, really kind of go into that, and I'm going to kind of hopefully get quite a bit done today, and I'm excited to see where your panels go.
I am too. We'll see how far we get. Like I said, I basically just have these figures at the top to clean up and a couple of the lines to tighten up. So I'm hoping if I could get that done in the hour, that'd be really nice. Although I'm quite a slow artist, so this might take the full 2 hours. So we'll see.
and,
But
and as you and I have said, everybody works at a different pace, right?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, the good thing, we do these streams every week, and I'm gonna start doing them from my home, and so this will be my time to work on this book. So hopefully, over the next weeks and months, you can follow along as I get some progress done on this book. So I don't feel the pressure of time to get this done, so I can kind of work at my own pace, which I really enjoy.
Well, I will tell you, if you are a comic book fan, this is a real treat. You get to watch the book come to life as it's being created. I think that's a rarity, Chad, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share that with everybody, because I think getting to see the whole process, and if this does become something that you consistently do week in and week out, with the comic book pages, that is, I think it'll be amazing to see the whole story kind of come to fruition and to really get to watch it just develop and grow. How special is that? And then I guess, which leads me to a question. You've been working on very large scale, unique graphite charcoal renderings. Is it hard for you to bounce into something that's smaller and more detailed? Like, is it a mental switch you have to flip? Or does it just kind of come naturally to kind of hover over the page, get back on the drawing table, the drawing board, from all that larger, looser stuff? Or is it a challenge?
No, I think the size part is not really so much a challenge as with the comic book. it's all imagination. So it's a lot of you just have to know the anatomy really well and have to know perspective and that kind of thing. And I'm not using any references, so I do a lot of erasing and redrawing, and it takes a lot of mental effort to draw comic book stuff. Whereas more realistic drawing, I usually have a reference I'm going off of, or a model in front of me or whatever. And so I'm not, it's not that that's easier. It's just a different kind of mental engagement. So this tends to take a lot more mental energy, just because I'm thinking a lot more of like making sure things look right. And then on top of that, I like to do my drawings with a lot of detail. And so I want to make sure the details look right. It's not, the details are not just kind of thrown in there, they're put in there on purpose. And so, just as I'm like working on the back of this leg for this robot, like I'm redrawing parts of it because I just don't like the way that the details coming out. I also have a tendency to do a lot of the same detail over and over, and so I have to be careful of that because I don't want it to be overly repetitive. I mean, it's good to have a certain style, but at the same time, I want to push myself to try new and different designs. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so this takes a lot more mental energy for me. So it's not so much a switch as far as like going from one style to another, like that being difficult for me. The difficulty for me is in the process of drawing and making sure that this is like there's so many more factors go into this, I think, than realistic drawing, in my opinion.
Right.
So
No, I think that's huge. I guess, something I find interesting is in the comic book world or even just in the art world, there are a lot of creators who will take references, right? Like, I mean, we know of a number of artists that will take friends and family and kind of pose them, or they'll hire models to kind of, pose in costume even. I believe the great, oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Alex Ross, I think, is known for, using models to like pose as Batman and Superman in costume and things like that. But I mean, I think for you, you really enjoy building it out from within, right? I mean, at least, in the conversations you and I have had, you enjoy kind of coming up with that on your own and that creativity. I mean, look at that camera angle, guys. I mean, that's a really nice, high removed camera angle that is really, really unique. It's almost Jim Lee-esque, in my opinion, like that dynamic, camera angle and viewpoint, which I think is spectacular. But is it the idea of the creation coming from your mind, or is it just that you just don't prefer to use those for your comic book pages?
yeah, so yeah, the angle on this is obviously intentional because I'm trying to create a little bit of I it's a weird thing because on one side I want to say create drama, but on the other side I want you to be kind of like an outside observer looking into the
Yep.
story, but you're looking down on this character. It's also I'm thinking of compositions holistically. So before I start the whole book, I'll do thumbnails, and so I want to make sure each page has its own unique flair and make sure they fit together and they make sense. So yeah, so the first page, the angle was looking up. The second page was more of kind of a medium side shot. The third page was kind of a pulled back further view, kind of seeing the whole environment. And then this one is from up above and more of a closer view. And then the next page will be a close up view, and then the fifth page or sixth page or whatever, I've lost count, but on the page after that it'll be looking down as this rocket is being launched up at you to create the final bit of tension or drama. So yeah, these angles are very intentional. So an angle like this is very difficult to find like a reference for. So you just have to know perspective and you just have to know anatomy to be able to pull it off. But I think I probably could do well with some reference, and I probably should use more reference. But like I think of the comic book or graphic novels Saga.
Oh,
I
yes.
think Fiona Staples, I think is her name.
Brilliant.
Yeah, she uses reference for all of hers. And so I've seen photographs that she's used of friends or family or whatever, and then I've seen the panel next to it. And so she'll use a live human figure for the pose, and then she'll superimpose her own creativity on top of that so that she'll, add the dress, add the lighting, all those other effects. With this particular angle, most of these figures I was able to draw from my head, so I didn't really run into a whole lot of issue. Some of the figures up top, I think the proportion is a little bit off, or the foreshortening, and so I've got to make some adjustments. That's why I'm like, well, this might actually take the whole 2 hours because I've got to fix some of the figures. But the main ones here are the android and the man laying on the board and all that kind of stuff. Like, I feel pretty good about all of that. Sometimes when I go back and I look at old pages that I've done, I can see some errors that I think, man, if I used some reference, I would have probably eliminated some of that. But it is comic book art, so you do have some artistic license. It doesn't have to be 100% exact, but I do want to make sure it's at least the fundamentals are correct as far as perspective and foreshortening and that kind of thing. So.
Well, I think even in traditional, quote unquote, traditional fine art, right? You always, a lot of times you go back and you look at stuff and you go, oh, there's some errors there, or I could have done that differently, or, whatever it may have been. But I do think that, comics as a medium provides a little bit more freedom and flexibility with that, especially stylistically. But, you mentioned something, and I'm so glad you did, because if you're one of my students that's currently watching this live stream or watching it on replay, you heard Mr. Chad just talk about thumbnails. And we spend quite a bit of time in our comics and cartooning class, Chad, talking about thumbnails and layout and just designing your story as a whole from beginning to end, right? Some people are able to dive in and just create a page and kind of go straight into it. But I think there's a huge element of planning out and making sure that things work well together and kind of come back and forth. And, I think thumbnails are a mentally cheap and materially cheap way to accomplish that. And then if you don't like something, you can make adjustments really quick, really easy, and not be like, oh my gosh, I just invested 30 hours on this page, or however many hours, couple of hours, and not be stuck on that and go, oh, I don't want to fix anything because I've just dived in so much. So I think that's an interesting point. Thumbnails, and the quote that I give all of our students is, thumbnails are your best friend. Thumbnails are an artist's best friend, where you're doing illustrative work, sequential storytelling, even paintings, guys and gals. I will use thumbnails to kind of plan out my layout, my composition, kind of getting in there. I mean, what's your take on thumbnails as well? I mean, thumbnails, in my opinion, are an artist's best friend.
Yeah, I think thumbnails are the good first step. So for this book, I did the thumbnails of all of them, and actually, if I'll show them here in a second. They're actually on the across the room. I'll have to get up here and get them, but I can show you the. Actually, I'll just go ahead and do that since we're talking about it. Why don't you say something smart here for a minute?
Well, I won't say something smart, but we are very fortunate. I believe Thomas, I don't know if you're ready to jump in. Are you ready to dive in here, bud? Yeah, let's get Thomas added in.
Hey,
we're going to see if we can get him going here. Now, Tom, are you going to have a camera on artwork as well, or is this the camera we've got today? I'm going to see if I can change out the layout a little bit.
I have another camera as well. But
awesome. So if you get that situated, I'll see if we can get the layout adjusted, guys. If you haven't noticed, I am also producing the episode as well. So I'm switching between cameras, going full screen, going widescreen. And right now we've got a lot of negative black space. So here in a second, I'm going to see if I can get this adjusted. But ladies and gentlemen, we're very glad to have Thomas Tupper, our co-founder, on as well. He's going to be doing some drawing. It looks like I might be the only one painting today because, Tom, what are you going to be working on for us, bud?
I'm going to continue the figurative drawing that I started the last time. So just going to keep on working on the initial SketchUp of the two figures that, I have. And then I'll probably move on to, doing at least one detailed drawing of either one of the faces or the hand poses for this same, drawing. That ideally then I'd do a more finished drawing, maybe even with color pencil or pastel.
Awesome. Well, for all of you painters out there, I'm your best friend tonight. But if you're looking for drawing and drafting, Thomas and Chad have got you guys covered. We're so excited to have such a variety. The whole goal is to talk about different techniques, different skills, get all kinds of different things going. I'm super excited to have all of us join today, and we're just glad and excited to continue moving forward. As you guys talk, Chad, I know you were getting ready to show us your thumbnails. I don't know if you thought that what I said was smart or not, but if you have those thumbnails, why don't you go ahead and show us those? I'm going to see if I can tweak this layout just a hair and see what we've got.
Yeah, so when I'm writing the comic book, the first thing I'll do is write a script, and you can see it here. I'll just do kind of bullet points. I'll do page by page description, and I'll just kind of write notes for myself as far as how many panels, what the panels will look like, what's the basic action that I want to see in each page. And then I'll go through and I will lay out the entire book. And so here you can see this is about half the book. It's about 20 or 18, let's see, 21 panels here. And then on the second page, I got another 21. So this will be about a 41 page book. And yeah, thumbnails are just really tiny. They are what they are the description itself. They're thumbnails. So they're tiny drawings. The point of this is not to get into a lot of detail, but rather just to look at the composition. And I'll also put in panels to see how many panels I want per page. Kind of a very loose, sometimes I'll use stick figures, sometimes I'll just use shapes, just to give a sense of like what's on the page, where it's going, that kind of thing. And the advantage of doing this is when you see each page next to each other, then you can see if maybe your composition is becoming a bit repetitive, or does it really suit the story for what you want it to do. And so for this book, the first, let's see, 6 pages are all splash pages. And so you can see them at the top here. So you got to be careful with that because you don't want each splash page to look identical. You don't want it to be like a medium shot, just straightforward. So I try to do a bit of different angles. So you can see in this first one, this is like a little spaceship, and the whole camera angle is looking up as the spaceship is being launched. Here you see kind of a closer in shot. There's 3 heads there. This is they're doing like a surgery here. This one is someone announcing kind of or telling them their diagnosis. Now, the interesting thing about this, page 2 and 3, even though that's what the thumbnail looks like, they ended up changing once I got into the actual page itself. Page 2 I had done previously for something else, just kind of playing around with a thought. And my original design was better than the design I had done the second time. So I went with the original design. And then the third page, it was too much of a same kind of medium shot as the second page. So I blew it out a bit so that it's kind of a long view and you can see the entire room. And then this fourth page, like I said, which is what I'm working on now, it's kind of a down angle, then another close up, and then another extreme angle, and on and on. And so, yeah, that's the point of these thumbnails. They're just very loose and sketchy in and of themselves, but also the ideas themselves. They're just your initial thoughts. You're working through what the book's going to look like, and they're not necessarily set in stone. So just because you have a layout here that you started with, you might change it by the time you get into the actual page itself. But with the thumbnail, it allows you to change things and still make it cohesive with the other pages around it.
Yep. And to me, getting to see that is exhilarating. Getting to see your process and knowing that you can change it and modify it, that to me is just absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, guys, to be able to see all of that, it's huge. A lot of times you don't get to see the beginnings and the groundworks of storytelling. And as I mentioned to all of our students here, thumbnails are an artist's best friend. Thomas, I think you would agree. I know that sometimes you do really detailed thumbnails. I know you're carrying on this drawing from last session. If you guys didn't see the last session, go back and watch it. Episode 25. Thomas was working on this beautiful kind of gestural kind of drawing that turned into this great little sketch, and then it's turning into this fine drawing. But Tom, you rely on thumbnails a lot, even when you're shooting photography and things like that, right? You'll sketch out ideas and compositions and layouts utilizing thumbnails for a whole bunch of different mediums, right?
That's correct. I mean, the composition is something you really want to think about before, deciding on moving into a more detailed version of what you want to create. So, the thumbnail gives you that kind of quick access to the minimal parts and forms of whatever, the subject is. And, allows you to play with that and really kind of take, the educated decisions on how you want to, what the visual impact that you want to create is really about. And so you'll understand who your protagonists are, what shapes, what angles are the ones that, really need to shine through, and which ones kind of will later, be more you can push back with color or tonality But yeah,
But it's not just for drawing. My whole hope
exactly.
that you guys are gathering from our wonderful artists here is that it's thumbnails are not just for sketching and drawing or storytelling. You can use thumbnails across a wide variety of mediums and in a lot of different things as well. I just had a student come in who's at film school, guys, and he was talking about how, gosh, these thumbnails remind me so much of storyboards, and I was like, well, that's essentially the same kind of concept, right? Now, storyboards are used for shot selection and pacing, but it's the same concept, a cheap, easy method to hash out your ideas and your concepts in a very easily digestible scenario. And so thumbnails are a great thing. But Thomas, as you work on this sketch, right, and Chad, as you work on your all sketch, you guys are using a variety of tools. And this is something that I don't think gets discussed a lot. There's a huge amount of materials out there, pencils, erasers. Chad, I see you've got 2 or 3 things in your hand there. Do you have a favorite tool that you use? And if so, why?
Go ahead, Thomas.
For me, the kneaded eraser is always my friend, just because, it's, well, one, it also helps with the, kind of from a anxiety point, and just releases that, here I'm showing it, this flexible, nice eraser. And then you obviously can shape it into the, finer point, or block, I also like a standard push eraser, because it allows me to kind of wipe away in a more drawing manner, at highlights, especially at the later parts of the drawing. And then pencil wise, I'm anywhere from HB to B to 2B. That's kind of my happy range. But because I tend to, do quite a bit of layering, so I like to go little by little, building upon the same pencil work.
What was that range of graphite that you said again?
2B, HB, and B, which B I find is a little bit harder to find sometimes, but.
Because Chad, you use a similar range typically, right? Especially when you teach here, a lot of our drawing classes. What are the range of pencils that you like to use? And also the question about your favorite tools.
Yeah, so when it comes to realistic drawing, I like to start very light. And so I usually start with a 4H or a 2H to put in the initial layout. And I really encourage our students to start off with a H pencil, just because, just practically speaking, it's much easier to erase. And I also want them to learn or think in terms of layers of tone. And so you want to start light and then go darker. The tendency, especially with new artists, is to go in with a dark pencil and like lay in all the shadows. The problem is, once again, is once you put in those dark shadows, especially if you're going really dark with like a 2B, 3B, 6B pencil, it's going to be very difficult to get it like all the way erased. So your 2H or your 4H for me is your friend to start with. But when it comes to the comic book page, I just use a standard mechanical pencil, just because of how fine the lead is, and it's light enough where I can go in really light, and I can also make it a little bit darker. And the end goal is to ink it, so it doesn't need to really be a lot of variety in as far as shading, because you're thinking in terms of ink is very black and white. You're not going to get a whole lot of midtones unless you do a lot of cross hatching or stippling or whatever, or stippling or whatever. So I'm thinking more in terms of shape of tone rather than gradation. And then if you take it even further and you're going to color it, which I'm not going to with this, but if you are, then the color is going to handle a lot of those midtones and things like that as well. So you're just thinking in terms of line work and shapes of tone when you're drawing. So a mechanical pencil is good. And then in my other hand, I have one of these like really detailed small erasers. It almost looks like a mechanical pencil in and of itself. And that just helps me get into the really small details. If I had like one of those block erasers, I'd just be like obliterating my drawing. So this just helps me get into the small details if I need to make corrections.
And is that one of your favorite tools that you use, or just one of the go-tos?
I think it's both a favorite and a go-to. I mean, obviously, if I'm going to do a larger realistic drawing, I do like the kneaded erasers much better, just because it gives a lot of that same control, because you can mold it just like Play-Doh into like a fine point, and you can do some detailed erasing. And the knead eraser helps you a lot with gradations and things like that. Whereas with this, I'm not really worried about gradation. So I'm more worried about detailed lines. So this smaller eraser is perfect for that.
Well, you guys have given me, I've got 2 talk tracks I want to go down the path of. And so I'm just going to like trump you guys and total host it up today. But first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. I'm Seth Jones. We've got Thomas Tupper and Chad Nuss here. We're all working on lots of creative stuff. Thank you for jumping on over on Instagram, on Twitch, on X, on YouTube, Facebook. We're so grateful that you guys are here and joining us today. We're going to continue this conversation, and I've got 2 topics I want to go down the path of. I'm going to preface both of them so that these 2 gentlemen can start thinking about it. One, both of you mentioned layering in your drawings. We're going to start with that question here in a minute. But secondly, Chad, I want you to help remind me to bring this back full circle here in a little bit. But you talked about inking in the comic book process. And I want to dive into that a little bit, because I think nowadays, with the scanners available and the tools available, is inking always necessary? And I think that's a very cool topic of discussion to kind of think about, especially in the modern age of printing and reproduction and digital assets. But first and foremost, we got to go back. We are an academy and a studio, and we love teaching here at V.A.A.S. Gentlemen, layering with graphite. Why do we focus on layering so much? What is it for, and why is it so daggone important? Either one of you guys want to take it first?
Chad?
Okay.
Both of them are excited. They don't want to step on each other. So I should dictate. I should be better host. Chad, why don't you give us a little bit first?
Okay, so I think about it in 2 ways. I think about it with graphite, and then I think about it with charcoal. And there's a similar process with both. But with charcoal, layering is so important, because, like, for example, what I teach in our charcoal class is we start with some charcoal powder or some vine charcoal to put in a very light layer. It's almost like an underpainting. It's almost like, you're putting in that first layer of painting. Instead of having a white canvas, you're going to use a burnt umber or burnt sienna or something like that to like create just kind of a tone to the page. And so we do a very similar thing with charcoal by using the powder to just gives a drawing kind of an environment to work out of. And then through that, you're using the vine charcoal and the compressed to kind of bring in layers, but you don't want to go in there with like super dark. So you're just putting in the next tone. You're thinking from light to dark. And that's the same with graphite. I always tell students, like, don't start with that 6B pencil or that 2B pencil. Start with your 4H. Put in your main forms and your shapes, and then start blocking in what are your main shadows. And even with that, you're going to start with your 4H or your 2H and just simply fill them in. You can blend them a little bit if you want, but you're just indicating where all the main shadows are. The advantage of this is that as you build up layer upon layer, you create a kind of, I don't know other word to say than sophistication about your drawing. You're all those layers, what they're doing is creating these tiny gradations that you can't achieve if you're just doing an HB pencil or number 2 pencil and pressing really hard for the dark and pressing really light for the light areas. When you're using different grades of pencil, you're creating a flavor of the drawing that you just can't create any other way. I mean, if you want to liken it to cooking, if you just put in all the ingredients and just mix them all together and heat it up, it's going to be very flat. But if you take your time, you put in, your roux first, then you put in some stock, and you let that sit there for a little bit, and then you add your seasoning, then you add ingredients. That the more flavors you layer in there when you go to eat the meal, it's going to have a complexity about it. And it's the same with drawing. If you put in your 2H first, and then go in with the HB, and then go with the 2H, and then you go in with the 6B, your drawing is going to have a layering effect and a complexity to it that you're just not going to get with like just using one pencil. So,
before I turn it over to Thomas for that, talking about layering, I want to let everybody know that I am in a world of hurt here with these 2 gentlemen on this live stream, because both of them are foodies. They both absolutely love food. They are both really great at cooking and all of this stuff, and I can barely cook a grilled cheese. So when they go and sit here and talk about all these food methods and all these different processes, I'm sitting here going, Oh, gentlemen, you guys have lost me. I have no idea. I think I know what chicken broth is, or broth. I think I know. But next thing you know, they start going down these paths. You will get a lot of sports analogies from this guy, which, are completely unique. So if any of you guys are out there, but we do love our food analogies, especially in talking about art. Chad, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I agree with you fully on the layering elements. Thomas, what do you think? Layering, especially in graphite and drawings, why is it so important?
It's a little bit what we talked about last time, that there's this, three-dimensionality that we're trying to achieve in our drawing, perspective, volume, all kinds of fun, little tricks that we want to achieve with our 2D drawing in this case. And the layering is something that's really going to add to that effect. Cross-hatching for me is, although it's very tedious, I find that's the one that creates the nicest effect, the kind of up, your visual, just your brain, your mind really wants to see it as a photograph or as real life.
Almost the optical illusion, the Trump Lloyd kind of effect, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so, and I agree with Chad, definitely different pencils add different effects, and that takes a long time to master, kind of later understanding when to blend, when to keep just one type of softness of pencil or hardness of pencil. But yeah, but it, and again, like we talked last time as well, that's where the experimental part comes in, and doing those sketches, and once you've achieved certain levels with whatever is recommended in the class, then go home and practice grabbing two pencils that are on further down the spectrums of that scary end of the 5Bs and 8Bs, but learn to use it lightly, because it's gonna drop so much graphite on your paper that you really want to wield it correctly. I tried with what Chad said with what was it, the 4F or
4H, yeah.
4H, sorry. And I've done a couple of drawings with that, and it was challenging at first, but once I learned how to not expect such a dark effect, you also create these ephemeral type volumes, and so that became very interesting to have in my kind of catalog of memory and archive for something like if I ever need to draw like maybe details in the iris of an eye, or water or sweat, or a rain droplet, that I always kept kind of as a quick visual.
Well, I think it's interesting because you guys are kind of alluding to a similar thought, or I could be off here, but it's adding tools to your tool belt. Layering allows you to do a lot of different things, and then as an artist, you get to pick and choose with layers, rather than if you're just going in right away on that first go, on that first pass, hammering it in, really roughing it in. Layers allow you to be more conscious, perhaps, if that's a good decision or a good word to use. It allows you to make better decisions as you work through it. You're not just coming in right away and saying, okay, here this layer is, which sometimes works great, but it allows you to have more thoughtful processes perhaps in your drawing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also helps you shape and mold, that the volume. So having control, of that, and not it just being something that happened was by chance, right?
Yep. Purposeful work. I think layers are invaluable in every way that you guys had just described. But I also think graphite has a certain translucency to it, right? Because it's a ground powder. It's a compressed element. And so there's a certain level of translucent nature that happens with it. So as you build, you get this element of see-through, right? You get this depth. Because really, at a root level, and I know this may be a little philosophical for this conversation, but you are truly building layers, right? Depth. There's physical depth, even though if it's minuscule, right, Chad? Like on your drawing there, those areas that are darker and heavier truly are higher up, right? Thomas, on your hair there's more graphite there. So even if you can't see the building of layers, it is physically building on top of the page, which makes it significantly more dynamic.
That's correct. I mean, right now I'm working on this neck area, and that's a good example because you get the shadow from the chin and the jawline, but shadow that's on a cylindrical object, being the neck, that then has more cylinders within it, and so you really need to capture how one is not competing with each other, but light is being kind of dappled on and falling, as well as like arms, really understanding light source and reflection, I think is, where layering really comes into its true, form of, or need to have skill with it, right?
I agree. I mean, and from a painting standpoint, thanks for asking, gentlemen. From a painting standpoint, layering, in my opinion, is equally, if not more important, because you are building layers of color, layers of texture, whether you're going full impasto and you're layering heavy pigments on it, or in this process with the grisaille painting, it is building values underneath and then glazing on top and letting that undertone, right, shine through those pigments and letting those pigments, differentiate out into different values. But I think layering as a concept in all of art is incredibly unique. I mean, here's one for you, Thomas and Chad, because I know you guys are, very philosophical about it. This is layering is one of the reasons that people really enjoy Jackson Pollock, right? A lot of people think that it was just haphazard splattering and just arbitrary or randomness. But correct me if I'm wrong here. If you see those Jackson Pollocks in person, the physical depth and layering of those paints is really spectacular, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think not just his paintings, but if you look at in nature or regular objects, sometimes we don't take enough time to observe things and have the mindfulness of what's going on around us. So even some of the simplest objects have incredible amount of detail. And if you don't look carefully enough, your drawing can become a little bit flat because you're not reproducing that same amount of intricate detail that most people just kind of fly by. You can look at even a cartoon or an animation cell that looks overall simple, but then when you get into it and you see all the variety of color and shading and tone, you're really blown away. The reason why it seems simple, or the reason why you just don't notice it so much, is because it looks so real that it would be more eye-catching if you missed all that detail than rather than it look natural and beautiful. And so layering helps you do that. Layering helps you put in the kind of detail that you mentioned in Jackson Pollock. Like that's some of the beauty of being very free with charcoal or very free with acrylics or paint or whatever. Sometimes a lot of those like little variations that you just happen to take place in your painting or whatever, so it adds a lot of depth to your painting. It's something, it does something to your eye that reproduces that same effect when you look in nature or whatever you're looking at around you. So yeah, I would agree definitely about the Jackson Pollock observation you were saying.
Yeah, and you see it, in other forms of painting. Jackson Pollock, you have also layering of some form, whether by accidental splashes and lines, but also color use and obviously motion. But then you go, to, let's say, somebody who was more purposeful on how things were moving, which would be like a Van Gogh,
Oh yeah.
and you still have, another great amount of layering going on within each area, not only onto each color and tone, but the directional quality of small little parts of each painting, right? The skies, the wheat, the grass, all that. And we could talk about pointillism as well, and that's definitely all the layering there that I think the Jackson Pollock, our kind of collective subconscious, we draw on pointillism when you look at a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Whether you want to or not, there's something going on there that you're trying to understand. The human mind wants to find clear objects and identifiable objects, even in the abstract.
I would agree with that. I think sometimes that's the challenge of the abstract, is that we try to define it when sometimes it shouldn't be defined.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell students as well, especially when it comes to comic book work or cartoon work, that details, and I think details would fall into the category of layers, because you're putting more and more little bits of information in your drawing. Details and layering make the unreal seem real, because that's, as I said before, when you look even as simple as a leaf or I don't know, a aluminum can or just anything around you, a piece of paper, the way that light hits it or the dust in the air or whatever, there's tons and tons of detail that sometimes our mind takes for granted, that when you put it into your drawing, it's going to make it look that much more real, even if it's a super fantastic fantasy drawing or whatever, science fiction drawing or whatever.
Absolutely. I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of people. Pia, thanks for jumping on. So great to see you on here. We hope you're enjoying the live session. Loyal Generalist, my man, great to see you on here. Hope you're doing great. Everybody else that's on here on X, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, we're so grateful for you guys joining us. And guys, we got a really great comment by one of our phenomenal students, Patricia. Chad, Patricia's in here, and she's, as always, blaming me for something. I don't understand how come Chad just gets all the praise on all of these live sessions, and I just continue to get blamed for everything. I'm going to put it up on screen, though, because actually I'm being blamed for something that I think is absolutely wonderful. And Patricia, I'm so glad that you start to see it this way. Thomas, I apologize. It kind of covers your face up here, but on the screen. But Patricia says, I blame Seth for making me really see nature for the first time. I'm always taking pictures of trees to use in my watercolors. And I'm really great. And she also says, hey, Chad. So how about that? But no, but I'm going to make a comment about Patricia's comment. But it is really amazing when you start to create artwork, when you really start to create from your heart and from your soul. It's amazing to see how you start to see things differently, right? You start to look at value in nature differently. You start to look at textures differently. Most of our students come in and they go, oh my gosh, I was just at the beach and I started drawing this and I started drawing that, and you see this or you see that. And it's amazing how when you start producing content, you start to see other things differently. Like we had a watercolorist come in today we have the cicadas going crazy here in Kentucky. If you've never visited Kentucky during a cicada run, you've got to come and hear it. It's absolutely amazing. Thomas Shea, he's like, I've heard it. It's crazy. It's amazing. It's wild. And he lives in a tropic area, so he hears crickets and bugs all the time, and cicadas are nuts. But they came in with holding one in their hand and like, look at this amazing creature, right? It's spectacular. And I don't know if they ever would have looked at it that way had they not been drawing and creating and doing watercolors and paintings. And so I do agree. And I think it's absolutely spectacular, Patricia, that you're seeing things in a new light. And as you are a creator of content, you will continue to see things in a different light. I want your all's comments on this, but before I do, hello back, Pia. She says, hello, Seth. And I say, hello back, Pia. Great to see you. And Lax, I'm not going to get this one right. LaxMio08, thanks for jumping on here as well and saying hi. We really appreciate you guys. I'm going to go back to this comment from Patricia, though, Thomas and Chad, because I know you guys so well. You all also look at things differently, especially nature. Do you think that being a creator of art has changed the way that you view things, similarly to what Patricia is saying?
In my case, I mean, definitely yes. The short answer is yes, but I would argue that in my case, there was already an intrinsic curiosity, and being observant. That's something that I just, was innate with, and because I was interested and curious about things, and so being able to draw them allowed me to get to understand it more. But it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of situation for me. I'm not sure which one comes first, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to chime in, Chad. Sorry, I'll let you kind of go back to that. But I think, Thomas, sometimes our artists intuitively look at things closer, right? Or feel things closer. Mm-hmm. And so to your point is that's part of what drove you to be a creator, right? Was your ability to look at things and see things maybe more closely and more observantly, right?
Mhm,
Chad, was it
mhm.
kind of similar to Thomas? Were you kind of inherently, innately kind of seeing things more detailed and more focused, or did that start coming around as you continue to create and as you continue to produce?
Yeah, I would agree with Thomas. I mean, it's like a chicken and egg thing. I mean, it's part of being creative is that you just naturally look at things in more closely or with more detail than maybe someone that's not as creative. It's not something that you just, oh, I'm just going to decide to do it one day. I mean, you're just filled with awe about all the different things. Like I sit here and even just like looking at the curtains in my room, I sit there and see all these patterns of the way that the knit, or I don't even know how to say it. I don't knit, so I don't know what it's called, but like what's that? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just giggling, and actually, I was thinking, I
Oh,
was like, we'll have to get Pink Cut Sew on here so she can tell us all about knitting.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm totally butchering it, but I'm just looking at the pattern in the fabric and how they did that. And I sit here and think, if you were to draw that, it'd be very easy just to draw curtains and just shade them. But there's incredible amounts of detail though there. And so and as you develop as an artist, I think that awareness just deepens where, especially if you're trying to draw realistically, you pay attention to a lot of little details. Like even as I'm sitting here, I've got a little house plant and I'm looking at how the light is hitting across it. And you're seeing the tiniest little shadows across the leaf, showing a different kind of texture. I mean, just you become more and more aware of that as you draw or as you create. So yeah, I think it's both. I think you're already aware of it. And then as you create, you become more and more aware of it as time
Mhm.
goes on.
What
I'll
about
share something that again, because I'm nerdy and I get excited. During one of my painting series called Angels and Souls, I had a piece called Artistic Creation. And the idea was, and it's a little bit of poetry because I'm going to articulate this here in a second, is I think all kinds of creators, poets, musicians, actors, dancers, those who create have that inherently within them and have to get it out, right? They
Mm,
have to share it. And so this idea is that those souls that come into existence have to be filled with that from the beginning, right? They're created with that passion. And I think it's sad that some people don't get to experience that till much later in their years. I'm grateful that they get to experience it at any stage of their creativity, right? But sometimes they had a bad teacher, or they had a moment that they felt discouraged, or it's just not something they discovered until later in life. We have an 87-year-old who's painting for the first time ever, and it's exhilarating to watch her paint. It's amazing, right? So maybe that just lay dormant for 87 years, or maybe she just discovered it. It doesn't mean that it has to come into existence at the very moment, but when you have that feeling and when you get that excitement and when you see something come to life, you do feel things a little bit deeper. I truly do believe that. And it's not just art, the visual arts, Chad, right? I mean, your wife is a singer, Thomas, you've grown up around dancers your entire life with your mother's dance. I
mhm.
mean, we've been surrounded by other creative endeavors. Do you feel like it's contagious? I think, because to me it is. It's contagious when you're surrounded by that.
It's definitely inspiring, and going back to that, I mean, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a dancer, but watching people dance, and as an artist, maybe you're seeing it, you're perceiving it differently. We
Very good.
talked about music in the last session as well, and how that affects, and it really stuck with me, kind of something that we ended up our conclusion was how music is this awesome pathway to
Yeah.
opening anybody's creativity, and it's at the individual level, but it's just really, each person has their own experience while listening to a song, and multiple people can like the same song, but how it enters you and what it causes in you, what stirs in you, is unique, but that's, you have to imagine that that's abstract creativity. I mean, for you to understand that you like a song, even that you dislike a song, but when there's one that you like, you know you're creating kind of this abstract creativity of the things that song, that of the things that you like because of that song.
Yep. I agree. I've thought quite often about that conversation from last week as well, Thomas. Is
Okay.
is that music is a gateway to that, right? It's a door opening. It's amazing. I want to give a shout out here. Patricia says this, just so you guys know, if you're new watching, we are the Visual Arts Academy Studio. We teach art lessons to people of all ages and all skill levels. And she made a comment. She goes, I never noticed the detail on anything. Now I see things I've overlooked my entire life. And then Patricia also goes on to say, I don't want to say all the ladies, but the ladies in the watercolor class say the same thing. I do think that instruction can help you as a guide, right? It can help open the doors for you to, or it can't open the doors. It unlocks the doors for you, right, Tom? It unlocks these doors, then you can choose to open the door yourself. And I think that's part of being in that classroom environment or that studio environment. It allows for that key to unlock it for your creativity and for your mind to expand and to be exposed to it. And I think that's part of the community aspect, right? Thomas, you constantly say you don't have to create in a vacuum. You don't have to create in isolation. And, I think that's so true because a lot of times, like even tonight, I was a little tired tonight. I'm not going to lie. Coming onto the live stream, I was a little tired. Chad, you saw me earlier today. I'm like, man, I'm sleepy. I need to pull up on the couch. But talking with you guys and being even digitally or virtually in the same space with the two of you, it's exhilarating. I'm like, man, I could paint for another 5 or 6 hours. Luckily, we're not going to talk for 5 or 6 hours, guys. But you both know I probably could.
That is definitely true.
Well, guys, how are the drawings going? Let's do a little check-in. We've been working for some time. How are the drawings? How are the pieces?
Well, I was kind of struggling with a little bit of perspective here on one of these figures. I had to draw and redraw and draw again on one of these legs. I can show you up a little bit closer.
Let me take it full screen. Give me 1 second, Chad. Let me take it full screen. I'm going to move this here. All right. Go ahead and show us through that.
Yeah, so this part in here is a real challenge because you're looking down at him while he's moving forward. So, and I'm not super happy with this leg still, so I might kind of redraw it a little bit. But that leg is going down and away from the camera, so that angle of foreshortening is very difficult. And then you've got the leg underneath it, or the bottom of the leg underneath it as well, that's angled back, but it's also angled down. So it's really a challenge to do without a reference. So this one I'm still not happy with, but I spent enough time on it and it gave me enough of a headache that I decided to move on. And so now I'm kind of coming in here and just tightening up some of the details of these figures here. This one right here, I think I need to change and maybe bring his legs down a little bit longer, or I don't know. We'll kind of play around with him a little bit. And then I've just got these two figures to really figure out what I'm going to do with. And then this page will be pretty close to being done as far as for the pencils. And then I can move on. So it's about, first hour. So I'm not going to get it done the first hour, obviously. So we'll see how much I get done in the second hour.
I think you're moving right along, though, bud. I think for your standard pace of drawing, I think you were booking it.
Yeah.
And Thomas, I'm going to take yours full screen. Why don't you talk us through a little bit where you're at?
All right. Let's see if we can get a better angle there. So I've been working on this figure, kind of doing more blocking of the shadows. Although I do feel I've been doing a little bit too much, but honestly, I've been going little by little. And wherever there's kind of darker lines, it's where I've decided, all right, those are definitely staying. The rest I'm still playing around with. Also, like I mentioned last time, I'm working from a photograph or a photo on my phone that I took of a magazine. So, we've got this element that the three-dimensional object, the original object, was already made flat in 2D onto this magazine. And then I've taken a photo and went ahead and extended that two-dimensional skew. And so, when I'm going to go back to drawing this, I need to make it look, again, three-dimensional. And so I'm really kind of analyzing how light and volume, light and shadow, how they interplay, how the volumes, come across to the viewer. And so I'm laying out little bits of detail and information, so earlier, let's say here in this cheek part, that, I had laid down a lot lighter. And as I went ahead and started to darken other, facets of the face, now I can go ahead and darken that, darken, behind the nose here. I'll keep pushing in this brow area a little bit further. And now I'm going to concentrate on the neck because I really want that face to, jut out from the neck. The neck is, slightly in. So that's going to be a challenge right now. At this precise moment, I was working on this arm just to kind of get that initial blockage in of where the shadow's falling. And then I've worked this a few times, but now I'm finally getting happy with it, which is this shoulder that's in the background. It's bent over. So like her, she's grabbing her neck. So there's this quality of what's in front, what's behind, but then there's light that's coming down from the top of the figure, and that shoulder is actually receiving a lot more light, but we can't see it because the forearm is closer to us, but yet in more shadow. So that's really kind of a challenging little aspect there. So I'm going to leave that for the end, so I'm not stuck overworking that little detail. Just kind of laying out these other areas, and hopefully I should be moving on to the other figure because I've neglected the other figure. But in the first session, the previous session, I did lay out the scale, the proportions, and all that. So I'm not too concerned. Now it's kind of putting in those the facets and a little bit of blocking of values. I've also worked more and more on the hair because this main figure that I have has a hairband, and in the first SketchUp of that I did last time on the live, I just kind of laid out kind of hair. I wasn't too concerned with the detail of where is the actual hairline and all that. And so I'm also now correcting that all along the face, the framing, making sure that we get that contour of the skull, which is very important. I think
Well, gentlemen, oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, I think it was something you and I had talked once about with you when you're painting the animals and how you lay down hair, and then on top of that, and I think understanding the form that's underneath the hair is very important. Even if you can't see it, if you understand the skull shape and what are the angles and facets of that skull.
If any of my students in my oil and acrylic painting class are listening, see, even Thomas agrees, you got to paint the underpainting, you got to create the values and the forms underneath. It makes your painting come to life. You can go in and paint all that texture, all the feathers. Thomas, in our class, we're currently working on exactly what you just said. We did not discuss that before for all of our students listening, just so you know. Now, I'm going to go in a whole nother direction because, Chad, you just kind of critiqued your own drawing a little bit, and Patricia goes, it's so funny to see Chad give his own work the Chad critique, laugh out loud. Because, Chad, you are known for tough critiques, but the funny thing is a lot of our students have not had Thomas critique you yet. And, guys, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something to you. Thomas is your best supporter. He is your greatest cheerleader, but he is also one of the toughest critics I've ever seen of work. But it's done to help get you better. And Chad, I think that's kind of the same method you have too, is right. Like I am an overly positive coach. Anybody who's ever played under me, or at least I think maybe they wouldn't say that, but I am kind of a cheerleader and a positive coach. But critiquing is huge, and even critiquing your own work, Chad, right? Like you're constantly evaluating. Thomas, you're tougher on yourself than anybody would ever be on your own work. Chad, you're tougher on yourself than anybody probably ever could be on your own work. And I think I'm kind of that same way, but critique is a hard thing, right, guys? Critique is never easy, but it's always worth it. Don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's almost impossible to have an objective view of your own drawings.
True.
And one of the ways that I see that is when I look at a drawing I hadn't seen in a long time of my own, that's either good or bad. It's either, oh, I didn't realize that was as good as I thought it was at the time, or man, what was I thinking? I thought for sure that was right. And then I look at it and realize how off it was. And I think that's the same, for myself, when I look at my own work, I try to be as objective as I possibly can. And I try to be pretty harsh with myself. And I don't mean harsh in a way that's like degrading. I mean it in the sense of like, if it's wrong, be honest with yourself. It's wrong. So it needs to be changed. And that's the only way you really get better. And that's the one thing I always tell my students, especially when we talk about sketchbooks. And I know this is a bit of a different subject, but I think it applies, that a lot of times when people get into sketchbooks, they fill it up quickly because they're drawing all the things that they normally draw. They're drawing the things that they already know how to draw.
Or
And
want
I
to
always
draw.
tell them, no, find the things that you don't like to draw, because typically the reason why you don't like to draw them is because they're difficult for you.
Yeah.
And so you really need to work on that. Um, so to get back to critique, I mean, it's the same thing. What I usually tell my students is I'll ask them, I said, tell me one thing that you really like about this, and then tell me one thing that you want to improve on or that you think you would change if you had more time. Then that way I try to balance it by giving positive reinforcement, like, yes, you've done this really well, but here are some things that you need to fix for the next time. If all I did was say, oh, yeah, this drawing is amazing and you're an amazing artist, all I'm doing is deluding them into thinking that they're better than they actually are. And the reality is, we're all in the process of getting better. And so the artist that I was 5 years ago is not the same artist I am today. And I hope it's not going to be the same artist I am in 5 years.
Yep.
But, it's just like in parenting. If all you do is tell your child from the time they were born how amazing they are, and you never did any critique on their behavior, you would create a little monster.
I
And
agree.
so you need to, and I think in balance, obviously you don't want to tear someone apart and to the point where they're just completely exhausted and frustrated and don't want to go back to drawing or painting. But at the same time, you want to be honest and give both positive and helpful critique. So
Well, I'll chime in on this because I think there's the three of us were very fortunate to be able to attend art school, art university, or art college, right? And I think, I don't want to speak for the two of you, but I know, or I feel very confident in saying, doing a healthy and a well-executed critique is a learned skill. I really believe that, right? Like learning how to communicate clearly. We're talking a lot to our apprentice, Layla, and I'm hoping to get her live on here, about being able to communicate about your process, your methodology, your intention. That's a huge part of it. But then also to be able to listen to other wisdom and or decide, hey, that is not valid, right? Sometimes people in critiques say something and you go, well, that's completely not valid, right? Like completely irrelevant. But you need to decipher and really learn how to take it at both as a giver and a receiver of a healthy critique. That's a skill set. And Chad, you and I are right now in this moment, we have a handful of students who are very talented, very skilled, and their growth in a critique system is going to help them exponentially. Thomas, you had a number of years ago a handful of students that I know you and I've had this discussion where the critiques were challenging for them, right, buddy? Like they were tough. They did not enjoy that conversation and that critiquing. But some of them went on to art school and they came back and told you, thank you. You made art school easier for me to manage and actually put me at a different level. Am I right there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to Chad's point, I mean, you need to know, what the appropriate amount of critique, because you're not trying to go overboard. You're not trying to put somebody down, or, critique is really a process of, again, of observation and teaching you how to further observe and be self-critical, first of all, but also, to be able to criticize other people's work is an important skill set that allows, you to become a stronger artist, but also to learn to receive critique. And ultimately, especially if you're still in high school or below, I mean, you still have a whole wide world out there that's going to critique you whether you asked for it or not. So,
that's true.
Learning to already have, the appropriate standpoint and viewpoint on how people decide to critique or express themselves, and know whether it should affect you or not, because that's what's important. You need to define. And again, not all critique, you also need to know when to disagree with critique. And, for self-perseverance, I think, and also it's a process that everybody's going in a journey, and everybody's at a different point. So, I think what Chad said about his own work, I mean, I feel the same about my own work. You might come back to a piece that you thought was, going all kinds of, bad directions, and you're, pleasantly surprised to see that, you actually did solve it visually the right way, and vice versa. Then there's some that you're like, oh, that came out great. And then you see it a few days later and you realize, you really messed it up. And you got to keep working on it.
Well, I think, if you've ever, been around or if you watched our, I can't remember what episode it was, but with, Charles Pate and Mitchell Kaufman, two award-winning artists, we had a live session here. We talked about one of our great mentors, Jorge Alvarez, who was very tough on critiques. I mean, he was very tough, and it was kind of a challenge. And I again, sports analogies. Here we go, guys. You guys can do some chef. I'm sure, Chad, you can talk about the tough chefs, right? We all know Gordon Ramsay, right? But like the idea, which actually I'm just saying that because I've heard it. I don't actually know, but I'm assuming Gordon Ramsay was tough. But even those coaches and those critiques that are tough, it is sometimes a hard pill to swallow. But I always think that there has to come a point of self-preservation, I think is what you said, Thomas. I can't remember. Like, you have to decide at some point self-preservation is, because as a visual artist, we're putting a lot out there, right? There's a lot of yourself in your work. I think, Chad, I think you would agree that most artists put a lot of themselves in that work. And so it hurts, right? There's a deep cut to it where it kind of hurts you a little bit when you feel it, But I also think that's also the other side of the coin. And I'd like to discuss this side of a critique. There's so much joy that comes from when people get it, or they see it, or they experience your goal or the success that you are trying to achieve. We constantly talk about critiques in a sense of reassurance and growth, which is absolutely true. But critiques can also be something that brings excitement and joy and success. Right, gentlemen?
Definitely.
Yeah, that you were mentioning Gordon Ramsay, and I'd actually seen an interview with him where he talked about being hard on chefs. He like, you watch Hell's Kitchen, and he's just like yelling at chefs, and he just talked about like he approaches the chefs on that show or other shows or in his professional kitchens differently than like someone that's just learning how to cook. He's like, the reason why I yell at those guys or girls is because they know better. They're making idiot moves, and they need to be reminded that don't do that, Whereas someone that's just starting out and learning, they don't have the experience to know that what they've done is wrong, and you address the criticism or the critique that same way. And I try, though not always successfully, I try to do the same in class. Like, I know there's one student on the top of my head that I can think of that tends to be a bit self-deprecating, where she'll say, I really don't like this or whatever. And she's a teenager, so I've got to be like extra sensitive with that. And just, I'll encourage her, and I'll say, look, this is actually really good. And I'll point out a lot of really, really good things about I was thinking about our last project, actually, for our last round of classes. And I told her, I was like, there's so many things about this piece that's actually really, really good. I said, there are a few things that you can make adjustments on, but you need to really champion the good things that you've done in this. And so I'll handle that differently than maybe an adult or someone that's been drawing for a while, where I'll still say, hey, here are some things that are really good, but let's consider working on this or this or this or this, and the whole goal with that is that, as we've already said, is we want to see the person get better. It's not just tearing it apart just for the sake of tearing it apart. And it's not even really tearing it apart. It's just saying, okay, if you just make these small adjustments, this will be 100 times better. And and so that's, like I said, critique, it is an art form to give critique as well. And I'm not perfect at it, and I'm still learning how to give it. One of the things I try to do is be a bit sarcastic with my students, so they know that even if I'm a little bit hard, it's done in love and fun. And so I often will tell my students, like, oh, I can't wait for the critique part. I can't wait to tell you all the things you've done wrong, as just a joke, so they understand, like, that's not the end goal. It's not to tear you down, but it is really to build you up and make you a better artist.
Boy, this is where we need. Oh my gosh, and I'm blanking on their call sign or their name. who labeled you the humble wizard. We need them to jump on right here and be like, "Yep, the humble wizard strikes again." I'm telling you what, it's one of those things where I love the studio session and getting to work together, because collaborative efforts, collaborative energy changes the whole game. And if you guys want, I'm going to do a little check-in on my own portrait here, because I've gotten quite a bit done. You guys joining and having the two of you on here allows me to work a heck of a lot more. And I am super, super, super grateful, because this is one of my few times I get to paint throughout the week. And if you guys take a look at this, I am working through the process now. I'm trying to soften up. One of the things that I talked about, I'm going to zoom out here. One of the things that I talked about with one of my students the other day, Brendan, if you're watching, bud, this is a big shout out to you. We were talking about controlling the textures within your work of art. And if you all look here, it's kind of hard to see, but if you see this in person, the shirt and the pillow are very, very loose brushwork wise, right? They're very loose, they're very fluid, very big brush strokes. I am going to come in and tighten up some of the shirt here, some of the stitching, some of the folds. But now that I'm working on the face, I want a high level of contrast between the softness of her face and the looseness of the folds of the skin. Now, her forehead looks huge, guys. That's because there's no pigment on there yet. It's just the raw sienna.
It's because she's related to you.
Well, that is true. Her brain is very large. My daughter has a very massive brain because she's so brilliant. Just so you know, my wife is watching, and she heard you say that. She's going to get you next time.
I said related to you, not to your wife.
She's the fighter in the relationship. I wear funky hats and paint pretty pictures. But I want to have a contrast even of my application of my brushwork, if that makes sense, guys. You don't want to have, yes, I could pick and choose to have a beautifully fluid, loose painting. But for me, I want to have this nice, soft texture from all the blankets, the pillows, and the clothing. But then I want to give that rendering of the face. So I'm working on softening up this brushwork of the face here to really give it a different texture and a different feel. And so far, in layer number 1, I think I'm getting there. I'm really pleased with it. I think I'm getting to that point where I'm hoping to get to that stage where the next layer, as we talked about layers earlier in the live stream, those next layers apply on top, and it continues to build and grow. So I'm pretty happy so far, gentlemen. Thanks for talking so much. It allows me to paint.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming she's resting on a pillow or some kind of cloth there, but it looks like silk. Like, it's beautiful. Like, the texture that you've got there, it's pretty amazing.
That's a very high thread count sheet pillowcase there, my friend. For any adult, that's a joke for parents or people who have had to buy sheets before. I never knew what thread count was until I went and bought new sheets. And I'm just so grateful for the both of you. Thank you guys so much for being on and talking art with all of us and just building this massive community of creativity that we have. I'm so honored. It's such a joy, such a pleasure. It is one of the greatest joys of my life, and I'm so grateful for both of you on here. And for everybody that's watching, guys, if you've just jumped in, it looks like we got a couple of people that just joined on Twitch. Thank you for jumping in. We are the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. I'm co-founder Seth Jones, along with co-founder Thomas Tupper and master draftsman, the humble wizard himself, Chad Nuss. We are so grateful. We bring on other artists, guest artists. We're trying to get some other individuals lined up for you guys to ask questions, have fun. The goal is that you're creating with us. We don't want you just watching us and listening to us. We want you out with a sketch pad, with a pencil, with a paintbrush, some yarn, some knitting, some sculpture, whatever it is that gets you creative. We want you doing that along with us. We do this almost every single Saturday. We're on episode 26, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're so glad that you're joining us. Let us know you're here. Give us a question. Give us a shout out. It's awesome to have you guys with us. Gentlemen, it is such a joy to be able to create with you guys. I know that it's a joy to create with me as well, but I'm so glad you guys are here. Thank you for joining us this evening. We've got quite a bit of while to go. Any topics you guys want to discuss or anything? Oh. Chad, you did not remind me. The idea of inking in comics. Now, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but inking in comics really came out because of reproduction purposes, right? So the idea is that the black and white inking gave you so much detail that when you went to reproduce the comics, you could actually see them, right? Because originally they weren't colored. So it gave you enough contrast, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you're old enough and have tried to reproduce pencil under the old Xerox machines, good
That's
luck.
right.
Yeah, so you definitely needed to do more high contrast, and so ink definitely provided that for the artwork.
Well, and it was interesting because the reproduction processes were tough, but there's also pen and ink was a great drawing medium, right? So like even, when you look at manga and the traditional methods of like Asian created storytellers, ink washes and ink layering was always really, really big, and it provided a great line weight, great depth. It allowed you to do values, right? Hatching and cross hatching, as Thomas mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
But as we've advanced, I still let students use coal erase pencils, like animator pencils. But now that the reproduction process is high level scanners, high level printers, inking has kind of changed a little bit, right? Like you could scan in pencils. Your pencils are so detailed, so thorough. Like, do you have to ink, or is it a conscious decision that you just love how the ink looks and how it works? I mean, tell me a little bit about why you still ink, because the reproduction, it's not always necessary for the reproduction. I love your inking; it's amazing. But before you answer, big shout out to Ellie. Ellie, great, thanks for joining. So happy you're here. Thanks for jumping on the live stream tonight. But Chad, inking, why do you love it? Is it necessarily needed for reproduction? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's probably not necessary anymore for the reasons that you said. However, it's more of a stylistic decision probably at this point because ink definitely has a different flavor than pencil. I really do enjoy seeing the pencils, the original pencils before, especially with comic book work, before they've been inked. There's just something about them that's really vibrant and I can't think of the word. It's
There's an
either way, I'll
energy
think of
to
the
it.
what's that?
There's like an energy, an organicness to it or
Yeah,
something.
organic is what I was thinking of. Yeah, yeah. It's there's just something very beautiful about the pencils that gets lost often when you do the ink. I can't tell you how many times I've seen these amazing pencils, and then I see the ink beside, and I'm like, oh, whoever inked that just really destroyed the
A lot of Jim
the.
Lee work is that way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, his inker is amazing.
Oh no, they're brilliant, but his
Yeah,
pencils are.
yeah, exactly. So now, as you know, they've really started selling like special editions of the graphic novels, and they'll do them just the pencils, and I kind of enjoy those more than the inks.
Yep.
But there is something to be said about really good inks and just the clean the clean quality that you can get with an ink. I sit here and I think, man, it'd make my job so much easier if I didn't have to ink because basically when you ink it, you're drawing it twice.
Yep.
Um, and and that's what I also tell people with inks. Inks is not just tracing; it's its own art form,
Yes.
and so you're bringing a whole another level of character to your drawing. So there is a purpose behind it, I think, for my approach to inks, and I do enjoy inking. I do like the finished product of ink. I do like the clarity and the cleanness of it. But there is something to be said about the dynamic quality of pencils as well.
Mhm.
I like the idea that the reproduction processes now allow for creators and publishers to choose. It's a choice. It's no longer a have to, right? And
Mhm.
there's wonderful books out there. The world of publishing has changed. Graphic novels have changed. And I love the fact that if you can render really well in pencils, or if you can tell a complete image or a complete story in pencils, you don't necessarily have to ink. And not only that, Chad, we didn't even talk about digital inking. I mean, there are some comic creators that do everything digitally now, everything from their original drawings into their ink work. They do the whole thing either in Photoshop or Procreate or some of the other tools out there. I mean, it's pretty amazing how technology has changed the creation game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's made the process a lot faster. I know that's for sure. Unfortunately, I'm I'm your typical boomer, and I'm just like,
I wouldn't say
all this technology,
unfortunately.
this newfangled technology. I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. But I've never really the digital inking has never really appealed to me. I do love the fact that there are artists that can pull off digital and it looks traditional. It looks hand drawn as far as like with on paper. I don't know how they do it. I've tried it. I just cannot reproduce the same quality, but you know, every artist is different. They all have their own processes, and if they can get that doing that digitally, all more power to them.
Mhm.
But for me, I just have never been able to do it real well, except for traditionally. So
Tom, you got any thoughts on that, bud? You do a lot of different medium work. I mean, what do you think? I mean, especially we did talk about this last week as well with the digital age changing photography, right? But you
Right.
got any thoughts on that? How's that change in some of the mediums that you work in?
Yeah, I mean, the other day, somebody showed me a watercolor drawing, I think from Pinterest or something, but they sent it to me, and I was looking at it. I'm like, this is not watercolor. This is digital watercolor. This was, done digitally with that, the advancements in technology that allow you to use watercolor brushes on a pad or whatnot. I mean, it's surprising, and I'm a little bit on Chad's side here with the fact that I enjoy the feeling the traction and the I don't know. I guess this conscious effort to or the knowledge that you can't just erase. Like with digital, you just go step back, and try again. So maybe Chad and I are just thrill seekers or something, and we like well, you might mess it up real bad and start all over again type thing. But there's something alluring to it. Like all things, and we talked about it with photography last time a little bit. I mean, it's natural, that things should advance in technology, and obviously there's spaces where it makes sense to use it. I think when something's new, it's going to be applied in every which way, and then eventually it'll find its place of where it makes more sense. Again, reproduction, especially in illustration and comics and all that. Anything that's commercial setting, print, digital magazines, movies, all that. I mean, you want to reduce costs, right? But I don't think that means that you kill off a whole bunch of artists in the sense of they don't get on with the technology that they're going to fade away. I think traditional methods are always going to be appreciated, and if anything, it raises the quality or the bar for those that continue the traditional way.
Well, I think we can see this. Oh man, you guys, this is why I love these conversations. You can see this in a couple of my favorite industries, right? I was very fortunate to have some training and some wonderful experiences and do my teaching internship under the Disney animator Phil Young, who is an absolute brilliant draftsman, drawer, animator, storyteller, character designer. And, it was one of those things because he did not want to learn digital animation, right? At that era, when 3D animation really came out, it was not something that he wanted to do. He was a drawer and he loved the advancements of it. He thought it was amazing. It just wasn't necessarily for him, right, Thomas? But we're seeing a resurgence in traditional 2D animation, right, guys? We're seeing it, like you said, Thomas, it finds its place. It comes back full circle. It may not be as robust as it used to be, but there's an appreciation for the hand-drawn 2D animation. You're seeing it being utilized in a lot of creative short films. In a lot of film, you're seeing that skill set translate into other mediums. And you can also see this even in the photography world, right, Thomas? Film is coming back. People are shooting film again. I mean, yes, it almost died, right? It almost went non-existent. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you're seeing people shoot traditional film again. I mean, even Polaroids have come back around, right? My daughter has a Polaroid. It's crazy.
Well, again, it's there's good reason. Again, the same. Coming back to the academy, having the academy, and giving people who's either school or past life experience or circumstance doesn't allow them to explore art and take classes. But it's great to explore, to have fun with it,
Absolutely.
to wake up that artistic side that's within you, just from a having fun perspective, and I don't know, there's an enjoyment in the process that I think is what's important and shouldn't be lost. And that sense of wonder, childlike wonder. I mean, for your daughter, if anything, she grew up the opposite way. I mean, digital was the norm,
Yes.
you don't turn pages in magazine, you know, you just
Flick it.
flick it to the next screen, and that's that, you know. And expecting these on-demand, you know, type of a world. So, you know, learning this kind of hands-on tool, and you know, the awesome part of like film photography, the having to wait for the image to reveal itself and see if, you know, it was great or not, you know, it adds value.
I agree. I mean, I think, you know, I saw something the other day, and maybe I shouldn't speak on it because I did not investigate it more thoroughly. But I saw something the other day that said, you know, somebody asked, you know, AI, you know, who are the next superstars going to be, right? Like, because, you know, musicians and you know, actresses and actors and athletes and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it said original creators of content. And I thought it was interesting because I don't think it necessarily meant like, you know, like us live streaming right now. It meant more so like people who can tangibly create something physical, right? Rather than digital, somebody who can actually paint. And Chad, you see this, Thomas, you know this. This is why we co-founded this academy. But Chad, you see this every day. People come into your lessons and your classes, and how good is it for them to leave with something they created that's physical, that's tangible, that they produced on an actual piece of paper, or, you know, with pencils and graphite and charcoal. It's exhilarating, right? And I think we're seeing that cyclical nature come back into the fine arts. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that's true. And I think it's true in music too. You know, the idea of the digital music is great. It's phenomenal. It's awesome. It opens the world up to a lot of different things. But when you see somebody who can play the guitar, or this is amazing to me, the organ as an instrument is coming back, right? Like people are starting to play the organ again. Again, Thomas, something that was almost completely dead, almost a lost art, is coming back into existence. I think we're in that stage with the visual arts where people are really wanting that tangible, physical, real experience with their creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of my students mentioned the other day, kind of the negative effect of technology, with especially with iPads and Procreate and that kind of thing. We were working in charcoal, and we were once again talking about layering, and putting lighter layers on top of each other to create different tones and things like that. And she was remarking that because of programs like Procreate, where there's all these digital layers that you can just lay on each other and you can just erase or just remove quickly, she's like, it's taken away my ability to plan out a drawing, because I know on my iPad I can just erase, or I can just touch the screen once and it's gone. Whereas with this charcoal, we were using liquid charcoal, which is very unforgiving. It's like almost like ink. And so you really have to plan out what you're doing. And very similar to watercolors, very unforgiving. And with digital, it's very easy to just click the screen and it's gone. But doing it traditionally forces you to think in a different way. And I think for some of our younger students, that's very challenging because they're not used to it anymore.
But it's more rewarding, don't you think? I mean, I've had my students go, boy, this feels a lot better than when I did it in Procreate. And I don't know if they understand exactly why they're saying that, you know?
Yeah, I was I was focusing more on the negative side of it, but the positive side is exactly what you're saying, is that yeah, it's a challenge for them, but then they're like, "Oh, this is making me so much better because I understand understand layers a little bit better, and I can plan through it, and I take my time with the drawing, and the result is this thing that I've created with my hands rather than this tool creating it for me." And that's not a shot at all technology. It's not to say that you're not being creative when you use, you know, a Procreate or anything like that, but there's just something different. I mean, it'd be similar to when you go into a department store and you know, you want to buy a piece of furniture. You can buy a piece of furniture that was made by a machine, is stuffed in a box, and you bring it home and it's the same piece that everyone else has. Or you can go to a carpenter and pay a little bit more, but you're going to get a very specific handmade piece that is probably 100 times better quality. And you know, there's just something to be said about having that piece of handcrafted furniture versus something that's manufactured in a factory. You know.
I agree with that entirely. And I have a story for that. because we don't ever say something simply here, right? The short, or what the long version is, but the short version is something along this magnitude. We have a wonderful artist now. Oh, hold on, wait. We've got VFX time here now. He's here. VFX time. We missed you just a couple minutes ago. We needed you to chastise Chad and give him some crap for being a humble wizard. We're so grateful that you're on. But I want to give a shout out. He goes, it's hardcore painting. There is no going back. That's true. There is no going back, but you can fix things. You can tweak things. You can add additional layers. So even though it's easier digitally, right, Chad, kind of what you were alluding to, there's also, you can still do that in the tangible world. He also goes on, they also go on to say, but it's also fun seeing a finished product that might not be perfect. Sometimes there's perfection and imperfection, and I believe that, right?
Hold on.
And I think the two creators.
Before we go any further, I've got a very special thing for VFX that I have to reveal, and that would be the hat.
Nice.
Now I'm officially the humble wizard. All right.
This is amazing. Well,
I think I'll just draw for the rest of this time in this hat. There we go.
That's right. Look at VFX time. See what you started. This is amazing. Not only that, VFX time. I know you're not local. We know you're not able to be here. But next Thursday, Chad, I think next Thursday, you're going to be our live model for our drop-in drawing session, 6 to 8 p.m. And you're going to go full wizard costume because VFX time, he didn't just get the hat. You got the full costume, right?
Oh, yeah. And I didn't realize I was going to be the model Thursday, which is great. But I'm hoping by next month I should be able to get the staff too. So I'll be full on by next month. But yeah, I'm happy to do it this Thursday. It's going to be awesome.
That's amazing. I'm so incredibly excited for it. That's absolutely wonderful. I want to give a quick shout out to Janice. Janice, thanks for jumping on here. She says, you look great, Chad. And she says she loves V.A.A.S. Well, Janice, V.A.A.S loves you too. We're so happy. I hope those practices you took home today are working out for you. I hope they're going well. It's so wonderful. It's so great to see all of you guys jumping on. I was hoping I could find, I wish I had it. We are going to get some t-shirts made of Chad as the Humble Wizard. If I could find it, I would show you guys. Maybe next week I'll be able to get it for you guys here. But we're so incredibly excited that, Chad, you have that wizard hat because I think your hat is a lot cooler, man, now than mine. It's pretty sad. I love my hat. But, Thomas, we're going to have to get you a hat. I think you have a couple of hats. But we're going to have to get you one as well.
Sounds good.
Maybe I'll start wearing this hat to V.A.A.S.
Oh, I think. Well, you are a Thursday.
Oh yeah, Thursday I definitely will be. Yeah, that's for sure.
That is awesome, guys. If you can't tell, we have an immense amount of fun while we do these live sessions, and a lot of that fun is thanks to you all. Thank you for all the wonderful comments, for all the great questions. This is why we do it. Now we're selfish. We like to create. We like to dedicate 2 hours of our evenings on Saturday nights to draw. And we love this, but we love it also because we get to be a part of it with you all. And we're so fortunate that you are joining us on your free time, taking the time to create with us. We hope you have your pencil, your sketch pad, your canvas, your easels, your clay, anything you've got going on. We're hoping that you're creating with us because the whole point is to put the creativity in the conversation here on the V.A.A.S live sessions. So thanks for jumping in. It's so wonderful. I do want to go around again here. I want to do a check-in because, Thomas, you've advanced your drawing pretty greatly. You've gone from a lot of contour lines and working into dropping in a lot of values and shading and chiaroscuro in here. Tell us a little bit about where you're at, bud.
Yeah, the first figure I started with, I think I'm pretty happy with the majority of the setting. I'm now kind of just working a little bit of this background tonality just so that I can finish understanding, a lot of the lighter aspects of her arm and other parts, not by having a line that defines the outline, but more because there's a point where a darker tone meets a lighter tone. So I'm just adding some background tonality to really achieve that. This might not stay in the final phase, or again, this could become a color. If this was in color pencil, pastel, or paint, I would achieve this with just a contrast of color. But for right now, I'm doing this kind of laying out of a bit of background before I continue on to the figure that's on the left side. This also is going to allow me to measure the values and tones that I have already set in the first figure to make sure that they haven't gone too dark, or if I need some to push into lighter or darker. So that's basically the technique right now that I'm going for.
I think it's awesome. It's looking really good, man. You guys are
Thanks.
blowing me away with your talent and your skill. It's absolutely spectacular. Chad, I know you had some goals on timing, right? And you set yourself up. We spent, if you remember the first few episodes, Chad, you and I were in here and we were talking about setting goals up, right? Creative goals. You know, we had a lot of people asking, you know, how do you keep yourself on track? How do you stop yourself from getting, you know, a creative block or artist block? And you do give yourself some goals and times. And today you gave yourself a goal and a time, but you also know that if a piece needs to continue to be worked on, you work on it, right, buddy? So where are you at with this page? You had originally hoped of getting it completely done. We're still there. We've got about 20 minutes left, but it's looking amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll give you the kind of the overview here. It's still got some work to do, but yeah, this is pretty much the composition. I wanted to keep this area pretty open and clean. I wanted to focus it up here so that your eye would follow along up into this corner, go from very simple to more detailed up in here, and just the arrangement of the figures in this kind of a U shape really draws the eye this way, and that's what I was going for. The main thing that I need to finish now are those two figures up in the top, right up in here. They're still very sketchy, literally sketchy. And yeah, so once I get those two figures, everything else is I think pretty well done, and then I'll move on to the next one. So I don't know that I'll get this completely done by today, but that's okay. I'll come back next week, and either I'll have worked on it this week and get it done and start a new page, or I'll finish it next week and then start on the next page.
That looks awesome. V.A.A.S time giving you a big shout out, Chad. That page is amazing. I happen to agree with you, V.A.A.S time. We are very fortunate here at the Academy. If you're local, come by and right in our entryway, you will get to see an original page from Chad's graphic novel, which is absolutely amazing, The Silence. But then next to it, you'll also get to see the inked version of that page. And I think that's a really cool special thing to be able to do is you get to look at, as we talked about before, you get to look at the piece as the pencils, the energy, the looseness, you know, exactly what you're getting to see come to life right now. But then you also get to kind of step back and look at it when it's inked up and when it's rendered and when it's tightened up. And I think that is a really unique thing. So if you're local here in the Louisville area or the surrounding area, come by, take a look. We've got a lot of beautiful artwork. We've got a lot of artwork by Thomas and other creators, Costa Rican artists that are absolutely brilliant. We've got local Louisville artists. We have a whole bunch of artwork as well as the gallery upstairs that you guys can take a look at. We're growing here rapidly at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, and it's because you're joining us. So we're so wonderful and grateful that you get to be a part of the V.A.A.S community. Tell your friends, tell your family, come and create with us either digitally here on the live streams or even locally. Take a class or just stop in and say hi. We'd love to see you. Guys, it's been an absolute joy. We're rocking and rolling. I cannot believe I've gotten this much painting done. I know I'm usually pretty fast, but I'm really excited. Now, she has no eyebrows yet. You guys may be going, oh my gosh, look, she has no eyebrows. It's because I'm working in what, gentlemen? I'm working in layers. So as Thomas mentioned, I'm really focusing on her eye ridge and her cranium, really hammering that home, really getting the values down. And then I'll go back in and put brushwork on top for the eyebrows, for the eyelashes, really hone in on that and really hammer it home. But I'm pretty pleased with the amount of work I've got going on today. I mean, I'm shocked. And largely, that's thanks for you guys giving so many wonderful comments. Thank you guys for being here. Let us know if you're here working on questions, anything you got. We love it. We're excited for you. Guys, it's been a wonderful evening of drawing and painting. What do you guys think?
Yeah, very enjoyable.
I'm just happy that you're doing all the talking.
I do get carried away sometimes. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
One thing I guess I will say is I don't lack passion for what we do here. And see, right now, what I'm doing is I am working in those layers. I'm blocking in, for those of you that are painters and want to look at some of the painting, and obviously those beautiful drawings are amazing, but I'm kind of blocking in, not individual strands of her hair, but I'm blocking in the basic shape of the eyebrow. And I teach this in some of our drawing classes and our portrait classes, as well as painting, is I'm figuring out that next layer. I'm placing it in. I'm not worried about individual strands, but I'm worried about blocking that shape in, letting it start nice and loose. If you notice, I'm still holding my brush pretty far back. I'm not tightened up yet. I don't have a real small brush. I'm just beginning to drop in, and I'm letting it stay loose, right? I'm letting the brush do some work for me. And as we know, we can go back in and tighten that up. We can clean some of that up. But I'm really honing in on just the idea of shape, right? Shape, dimensionality, and form, and just kind of bringing that into existence appropriately, so that way I can come back in on my next layers and get it accurate. And we've got another wonderful comment here from Trish. I'm going to see. I've got oil all over me. Let's see here. Great evening, learning so much. Love you, monkeys. We love you back, Patricia. We're so grateful for all the support, all the wonderful comments, and we love seeing your growth in your paintings, your watercolors, as well as your drawing. It's absolutely amazing. We love you back, and we're so grateful for all the love and the support. See, I need to clean my brushes. I've been holding on to all these brushes. Starting to overload my brushes. I need to pull some paint off so I can get the real values of what I want.
So how many values do you create, or how, with the brushes, do you have kind of a set amount of grays that you're working with?
Oh, great question. So I do two different things. One, right, like I can show you guys here. We'll see. This is my base level palette.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have, this is where I will brush mix in my values, right? So this is where I keep just a wet brown, a raw umber. I'm not doing it in black and white. I'm doing it in raw umber and titanium white, because I like the earthier tones. I like those earthier temperatures in my grisaille better than just standard black. And so I work in this palette, but then I also will mix up anywhere between, I'd say 8 or 9 values on an additional palette. And so they're pre-mixed, they're pre-created, and it's not a full-blown value scale, but it gives me a nice range. And so I have these ranges. I think there's about 9 different values on this palette that give me starting points so that I know I can block in my pigments. And then usually I go back to this palette here, and that's where I'll pull in and create the sfumato, right? The values in between. And so I love the word chiaroscuro, and I'm butchering it. If we have any Italian followers, you may be able to help me pronounce that better. I'm from Kentucky. I slur all my words like I've got marbles in my mouth. It's Louisville, right? But the chiaroscuro really translates from the Italian into light dark. And that's where those 9 presets, Tom, right, help me get those light dark, that full value scale or full value range. Right. But then this is my favorite palette. This is where I take those 9 and create the sfumato, or the smoke, the values in between values. Nice. And that's where I really try to go, okay, I'm going to start with my 7 or 9, but then I'm going to expand way beyond that.
Very good.
And then as far as brushes, I usually have a handful that I absolutely love, Tom. I typically work with 3 or 4, a filbert, a good flat, and a nice round go a long way. But it just kind of depends. This is a very large painting. It's 30 by 40 inches. And so you remember this. Alvarez used to yell all the time, use the right size brush, right? He always hated people going into paintings with these needle-like little brushes that are huge spaces. And so I've switched over to a pretty healthy, a bright, a flat quart. I don't even know what size this is, but it's pretty big. And it's allowing me to move paint appropriately along the canvas so that I can start getting some coverage, because some of these areas are pretty large, and I don't want to just needle it in, right? I kind of want to place it. So I have some favorite brushes, but I usually try to find the brushes that are appropriate for the painting, right? If that makes sense. So if I'm working smaller, I'll find some things that are more appropriate in that size.
Okay.
I think you kind of work the same way too, right? You kind of pick your brushes when you paint. You kind of pick them for the for the size of the painting you're working?
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning, I mean, broad, nice and big brush, that kind of allows a looseness of the underpainting that then kind of the same way I started this, drawing in the last session, it was quite rapid and loose. And I was really just looking more at angles of, the arms, like the actual directional angles of forearm, upper arm, shoulders, all that. So it's the same, you want to have that kind of loose foundation so that there's a life or dynamic aspect, first and foremost, that then you go correcting bit by bit and adjusting the detail. I mean, this was going to be a sketch, and then I was going to do a second, more detailed drawing. Now I'm, gone a little bit more detailed, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So
You mean sometimes the artwork takes kind of a life of its own, right?
oh yeah.
And Chad, I think you would agree with that. How many times do you do a drawing, especially, and I love getting to see your life drawing session, charcoals and drawings. How many times does what you're working on turn into something other than you planned? Is it often, or do you usually get to stick with it exactly how you thought it was kind of gonna kind of go?
Oh, no, I only draw what I plan.
Again, there's that humbleness with that hat. I love it.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, even on the most immediate one I can think of is a large landscape that I often work on here on Saturdays. There's a big section of that I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do, and I had a plan going into it and turned into something completely different. It was like in the middle of it, I was going to do this huge like storm cloud and like kind of a valley and that kind of thing. And it was still a storm cloud, but it turned out to be a lightning storm on top of a mountain, which was a different direction. So stuff like that happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, with the figure drawing, it's a little bit different. If you're doing a figure, I'm trying to draw what I see in front of me. But, if it's a composition or a larger picture that I'm trying to work on, where there's a little bit more freedom, then yeah, often things will change. However, the one thing I would say that you have to be kind of careful, or I have to be very careful with in that, is the tendency to want to change things because they're more comfortable, or like relying on kind of what rather than trying to do things that you're not good at. And so I often talk about that with students about when it comes to abstraction. Sometimes, like, I've done a few abstract works, not a whole lot, but like as far as with painting and things like that, I find myself, if I'm trying to do something that's not working, I will go back to what I know, and then the painting will kind of look like what I've done before. And just abstraction in general, I think sometimes someone starts out with realism or with a plan and that kind of thing, and if it's not working out, it's so much easier to just like, well, I'll just deconstruct this and make it into something abstract, when the whole goal up front was something a little more realistic. So I think, to that topic, like, you have to be careful with abstraction, that you're going into it with an intention with your abstraction rather than falling back on that because your original plan didn't work. But at the same time, I think, you're the artist, so there's, definite room for flexibility. And I think that's where a lot of discoveries are made when you try something you've not done before. You went in a different direction.
Tom, any thoughts on that, bud?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about some of those topics last time, and because I started out with my abstract drawing, and
That's right.
there is that whole sense of, you think it's just random, but it's not random. You're definitely laying down kind of your general composition first of all, deciding what elements are the ones that take the main stage, with good reason. And yeah, you of course adjust things along the way, but there's definitely a foresight that needs to be maintained, so that it has an organized path, to creation.
I think finding a balance between intention and reacting, right? Like, I think you both said it beautifully. It's this is my intention. Am I reacting to it out of a healthy growth, or am I reacting to it because of a lack of ability, right? Chad, you and I talk about that quite a bit as a lack of ability. And this is a great question from Janice. Man, Janice throwing some heat out there in the sense of, should you always have a plan? And I don't think so, Janice. I'm going to let Thomas take this one because I know he has some opinions on this, because abstraction and looseness and everything else, you can just naturally let things happen. But Tom, what do you think? Should you always have a plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit what we were talking about at the beginning when I jumped in on this session and doing those sketches and, compositional sketches, even with photography. I think you should have a quick drawing or, maybe 3 or 5 that you just kind of did, if you're drawing, let's say, a landscape or something, or even an object in front of you, to do a quick sketch, small, thumbnail, just looking at the main shapes, something you could do in a minute to 5, and then move yourself, so the object doesn't change, but you change your where you're standing and your viewpoint towards it, and then do another, little SketchUp of it. I think that's important, and that's as much as I would say is your plan that you should stick to. In other words, that's kind of the guideline that you have that you can always kind of say, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve is, to have this perspective on the object or the scene. But I don't think the plan is a completely, detailed plan, but definitely something that guides you along the way. So, if the paint gets messy or, you're just feeling kind of lost in the drawing, you can go back to that real quick and say, all right, this is what I'm losing from the original point of view that, that attracted you to create that piece.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I agree, but I also think Janice is maybe saying, like, what if you just, because she does a lot of beautiful abstract watercolor work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is there times where you can just kind of sit down and just let the medium do what it needs to do? Because I agree with you, Tom, in the sense that, like, I have a goal in mind, right? I'm going to convey X emotion, or I'm going to convey this. It can be very abstract in what you're trying to achieve, right? I mean, it can be very broad, Janice, of what I'm trying to do. But typically we sit down with some kind of goal in mind, right? I think that's what you were saying, Tom.
Yeah.
But sometimes, is it okay to just let the medium be the medium?
No, for sure. I think, a lot of times you got to start by just, letting your hand flow and your creativity flow, and let the medium, kind of go in the direction it needs to go. And as that starts happening, you formulate a plan. Or I guess maybe I'll say it differently. I don't think in this case the word plan is the applicable word. I would say a strategy and a next step, specifically in a next step strategy type of basis. So, because let's say you start putting some paint down in a free form way, and you created a nice movement, a great, color or a great shape. But, you do need to start having a next step kind of mentality so that you don't lose that or, then end up covering it up.
Chad, what do you got? You got thoughts on that? Because I know with charcoal, you've loosened up tremendously and you've kind of let some things go. What do you got? What do you think on that, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really add much more than what Thomas has already said. And the thing I always wrestle with is, I mean, I think you can go into a drawing with no plan and just go for it. I think the thing you just have to be careful about is when you get to those places where you don't know what to do, of just relying on what you already know and not trying new things, and maybe going into a piece not worrying whether it's going to be successful or not. Just try new things, like just make a lot of mistakes, and maybe make some compositions that aren't that great, try some color combinations that don't really work, and that's okay. Like in the midst of that, you can maybe come up with a new idea or a new direction that you can try. So I definitely think you don't necessarily always have to have a plan. I think the thing I would just guard against is, if you're going to go without a plan, just don't avoid those things that are hard to draw or hard to paint because they're hard to do. That can be the kind of the crutch of abstraction, I think. Yeah. So.
Well, I think you added something beautifully on top of what Thomas said. And guys, we are just so fortunate to have both of you here for all of our students, all of our followers, everybody across all the platforms. We're so grateful for you joining us every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You guys, this is just a phenomenal experience. It's so wonderful. We thank you guys so much. Janice, I hope that answered your question. What a wonderful question. We're so grateful that you guys join us. We're coming up on the end of our time, guys. Any last minute thoughts or comments from Thomas or Chad? Either one of you guys got anything you want to throw out there before we close it up for the day?
I think, just what Chad just said, and we also talked about that, that constant practice, and what Chad said about and we talked about it last time. Every time you go to create, it shouldn't be with the mentality of doing a finished piece. A lot of times it's that constant practice. Sometimes it might become a finished piece, and that's perfectly okay. But kind of taking that strategy and that exercise, and so today you drew this, let's say in my case, and this came out well. All right, so maybe I leave it there and then I start again, and focus on a different area. But that constant practice to then, understand what your next step strategy and or plan will become.
I agree. Our humble wizard, any closing thoughts for us? Go, humble wise one.
Man, I really wish that I had some Tolkien memorized right now, especially Gandalf, because that would really work right about this point, but I don't. So I'm just going to leave it with just being thankful for this time together, and I look forward to Thursday, definitely. Being the humble wizard and being the Gandalf model, I cannot wait for that day. And no, I just enjoy spending time with you guys, and I love the conversation for sure.
Absolutely. We got one last comment, and I think it's applicable to everybody. VFX Time asking, you guys coming next week? I believe next week it's Chad and Thomas, I think. Thomas, you're able to make it next week?
I am unfortunately not able.
Okay, so Thomas isn't going to be here. Chad will be here. Chad will be here. We may be able to get Layla, our apprentice, here out of the studio, which hopefully will be good. I unfortunately won't be here because I'm going to be watching my daughter perform a play. And I am incredibly honored and excited. She's been rehearsing for so many months, so I'm grateful and honored that I get to be there for that. VFX Time goes, I can carry on with Chad. Yep. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
But Chad will be here next week, the humble wizard himself. We're going to hopefully get some additional Thomas has been working really hard to find some additional artists that we're going to get jumped on here, guys. We want to bring an entire community to you of unique creators, unique artists, not just us here, not just the instructors here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, but a world of creativity coming to you live through our sessions here. So VFX Time, we will see you next week along with Chad and hopefully an additional guest. But we're so grateful for everybody on Twitter, X, or I guess it's X now. It's not Twitter anymore. On X, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We're so grateful. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
See y'all.